My name is Ana Duarte. And if you had told me 5 years ago that I'd be standing in a courtroom opposite the man I gave up everything for, I would have laughed. I would have told you, no, not us. We're solid. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. But solid cracked the moment I chose motherhood over my promotion, and my husband decided to rewrite the rules of our family without me. Let me take you back. Started with a phone call. I was in the back room of the non-profit library where I worked. Boxes of donated books stacked to the ceiling. My phone buzzed and I answered on the third ring. Ana Duarte. Yes. This is Christine Lee from the Horace Foundation. I wanted to congratulate you. We've selected you for the Paris program. I dropped the box I was holding. Paris program. It was a dream assignment. A full-year executive exchange for rising nonprofit directors. Training in community outreach, policy development, and fundraising on a global scale. I had applied months ago just to see what might happen. And it happened. I went home practically floating. But by the time I told Marcos, the dream had already started unraveling. He sat at the dinner table, swirling his wine, eyebrows tight. Ana, it's not the right time. Not the right time. Blink. You encouraged me to apply. I didn't think you'd actually get in. The words hit harder than I expected. I thought you believed in me. I do. But Paris. For a year. We have a daughter, Ana. I glanced at the hallway, where Sophia was humming to herself while coloring. She was only 4. I'm not leaving her. You could both come. Or maybe we could. You're really willing to uproot her entire life for some title? That's how it began. The guilt. The hesitation. The slow, quiet erosion of what I thought was a partnership. By the end of the week, I declined the offer. By the end of the year, I'd left my job to focus on the family. And 2 years later, he left us. He said the words casually, like he was telling me we were out of milk. I'm moving out. I was washing dishes. Sophia was watching cartoons in the living room. Her small voice drifting in with a theme song. What? I've been unhappy, Ana. We both have. I shook my head. Unhappy? You said things were getting better. I've met someone. It wasn't the words. It was how easily they came out of his mouth. Like it was inevitable. Like it had always been coming. And suddenly I realized. This man had been planning his exit for months. I found out later, through mutual friends and eventually through emails I wasn't supposed to read, that he'd started seeing his colleague about a year ago. The same colleague he swore was just a friend. He left the next morning with 2 suitcases and a box of records. He didn't even hug Sophia goodbye. We struggled. Badly. I hadn't worked full-time in almost 2 years. My resume felt like a museum exhibit. And every job interview ended the same way. You're overqualified for admin. You don't have recent experience for leadership. We'll keep your resume on file. Eventually, I took a job as a receptionist at a small private school, Morstone Academy. The pay was basic, but they offered tuition benefits for employees' children. Sophia started first grade there the following year. Felt like a miracle. She made friends. She smiled again. The teachers were kind, and the headmaster took a liking to her early on. She's sharp, he told me one morning. Reads like a 4th grader. I finally felt like things were turning. Until the interview. It was a Tuesday when the email came in. Subject. Admission interview, Sophia Duarte. Clicked it, confused. She was already enrolled. There were no interviews pending. But as I read further, my heart dropped. We received an application from Mr. Marcos Duarte and Ms. Marlene Soares for Sophia Duarte to be considered for enrollment at Wellsworth Academy, beginning next semester. As part of our policy, we require an in-person family interview. Marlene Soares, his new wife. They were moving her. Behind my back. I confronted Marcos that night. Called. He didn't answer. Texted. He left it on read. So I showed up at his apartment. The door opened and there she was, Marlene. Glossy hair, expensive heels. looking at me like I was an uninvited guest at her gala. "I'm here to speak with Marcos. He's busy. I'll wait." He appeared 10 minutes later, annoyed, shirt half-tucked. "What are you doing here? You applied to transfer Sophia to another school. Without even telling me. She'll have more opportunities there. She's happy where she is. She'll be happier at Wellsworth. Their early college track, their language immersion, it's the best. And we're more financially stable to support her future. I work at Morstone. She gets a scholarship because of it." He shrugged. "We can afford full tuition. She doesn't want to leave. She's a child. She'll adapt." And then he said it. "We're filing for primary custody. Full." I didn't sleep that night. The next day, I asked to meet with Morstone's headmaster privately. "I need help," I said. He closed his office door. And that's when I told him everything. How I gave up my career. How Marcos left. How I rebuilt everything to give Sophia a stable life. And now he wanted to take that from us. He listened in silence. Then he nodded slowly. "There's something you should know," he said. "What?" "One of our guidance counselors. She recently met with Marlene and Marcos." "Why?" "They wanted tips on how to frame Sophia as a better fit for Wellsworth." She recorded part of the conversation. Said it felt off. My pulse raced. "You mean she has evidence? She's debating whether to come forward." That night, I sat with Sophia as she colored on the kitchen table. "Do you like your school?" asked gently. She nodded. "I love it. Miss Patel says I read faster than she can." Smiled. But inside my chest was breaking. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that her life might change because of decisions made in courtrooms, not classrooms? How do you protect someone so small from forces that pretend to act in their best interest, but really want control? I didn't know what the next weeks would hold. But I knew one thing. I would fight for her. Even if it meant standing alone in court, staring at the man I once trusted with everything, who now wanted to take my daughter away. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not the air, but the atmosphere. It had that sterile stillness, like a hospital hallway after visiting hours. Everyone pretending to be neutral, objective, professional, but you could feel the tension crackling just beneath the surface. Marcos sat across from me, dressed in a dark gray suit, jaw clenched like stone. Marlene sat beside him, perfectly styled, her lips in a faint, smug curl. She didn't look at me once. Their lawyer was a tall, silver-haired man who oozed confidence and condescension. Mine was a kind-eyed woman named Daniela who had taken my case pro bono through a women's advocacy network. We'd prepared. We'd reviewed every visitation log, every school record, every text message. Still, I felt like I was walking a tightrope over open water. Because Marcos didn't just want shared custody. He wanted to erase me from the equation. His petition framed me as emotionally unstable, financially insecure, and unfit to provide long-term academic structure. He pointed to the career gap I took for Sophia. He claimed I was clinging to a job below my qualifications out of bitterness. What he didn't mention was the truth, that I had built a life out of the ashes he left us in. The judge listened patiently to opening statements. Then came the evaluations, the guardianship reports, testimonies from teachers. I sat quietly, gripping the edge of the table, listening to people assess me like I was a broken object. But then something shifted. Daniela stood and said, "Your Honor, we'd like to call an unexpected witness." I looked at her, confused. This wasn't part of the plan. The courtroom doors opened, and in walked Rachel. Rachel Flores, Morstone's guidance counselor. Mid-30s, always calm, always kind. She walked straight to the stand and took the oath. Her voice was steady. "I met with Mr. Duarte and Ms. Soares 3 weeks ago. They asked to discuss how best to transition Sophia to a different academic environment." The opposing lawyer tried to object. He said it was irrelevant. The judge allowed it. They said they wanted what was best for Sophia, But the conversation veered quickly. Rachel continued. Marlene asked me if I could subtly phrase Sophia's emotional growth as inconsistent. She said, if we make it seem like she's struggling, we can argue she needs more structure. There was a silence so sharp you could feel it slice through the room. Rachel reached into her purse. I found their requests unsettling, so I recorded the second half of the meeting. For my protection. I didn't plan to use it unless something like this happened. She handed the USB drive to the clerk. The judge looked skeptical. Is there a reason this wasn't disclosed earlier? Rachel answered. Because I wasn't sure it would go this far. The judge motioned for it to be played. We all listened. Marcos's voice, casual and confident. We just need to show the court that Anna's holding her back. Emotionally. Academically. Whatever sounds most credible. Marlene's laugh followed. It's not even a lie. The kid's been too babied. She needs structure. And Anna can't provide it, Marcos added. She's clinging to that receptionist job like it's a badge of honor. Felt sick. My hands trembled under the table. I looked at Marcos, whose face had gone pale. The judge paused the recording and turned to him. Mr. Duarte, is this your voice? He nodded slowly. And you submitted this petition claiming your motivations were purely in the child's interest. His lawyer tried to pivot. Your Honor, parents sometimes speak candidly in private, but that doesn't. The judge cut him off. I've heard enough. Then he turned to me. Ms. Duarte, do you have anything to say before we move forward? Understood. I hadn't planned to speak. But suddenly, I felt my voice rise from somewhere deep in my chest. I gave up my career to be the mother my daughter needed. I chose her over everything. And I did it thinking I had a partner, someone who saw that sacrifice. But he left. And I rebuilt. And I've worked every day since then to give her stability. Safety. A home. I looked at Marcos. She doesn't need more structure. She needs truth. She needs to know that the people fighting over her actually see her. Not just their version of what makes them look good. The room was quiet again. Sophia's teacher had written a letter, which Daniela submitted. Her art projects, her reading scores. All evidence that she wasn't struggling, that she was thriving. The judge took a recess. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I allowed myself to exhale. Back in the hallway, Rachel hugged me tight. I couldn't stay quiet, she said. I couldn't let them twist her into something she's not. I whispered a thank you that barely left my lips. An hour later, we returned to the courtroom. The judge's decision came swiftly. Based on the testimony and submitted evidence, I'm denying the motion for primary custody by Mr. Duarte. Sophia Duarte will remain under joint custody, with residential placement continuing with her mother. Any future requests for change in custodial status will require comprehensive psychological and educational evaluations. I didn't win everything, but I won enough. Because Sophia would stay in the home she knew, with the school she loved. And the truth had finally come to light. Outside the courtroom, Marcos wouldn't meet my eyes. Marlene looked furious. I watched them walk away, their perfect facade cracking at the edges. Daniela turned to me and smiled softly. He underestimated you. I shook my head. He underestimated her. I was about to leave when my phone buzzed. A message from the headmaster at Morstone. Let's talk soon. There might be a better position for you, if you're ready for more. I stared at the message for a long moment, and then I smiled. 2 weeks passed after the ruling. 2 weeks of waking up without dread. Of walking Sophia to school knowing she wasn't going to be torn away. Of sipping my morning coffee without waiting for the other shoe to drop. Marcos hadn't tried to contact us. I hadn't expected him to. What surprised me, though, was Marlene. She sent me a single message. You think you won. But she'll grow up and resent you for making her small. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because Sophia wasn't small. She was just finally allowed to be seen, to grow at her own pace, in a world not filtered through someone else's ambition. When we walked into school that Monday, something felt different. Not in the hallways or the classrooms, they were the same. But in how people looked at me. Teachers smiled longer. Parents nodded with a quiet sort of respect. And when I reached the reception desk, there was a note waiting for me. Please see Mr. Hollander at 10 a.m. Private. It was from the headmaster. I walked in expecting a staff update. Maybe a logistical matter. But Mr. Hollander stood up and extended his hand. Anna, he said, have you ever considered returning to leadership? Blink. What do you mean? We're creating a new director of community engagement position. Someone who can build outreach, connect with parents, strengthen donor relationships. It's a position that demands someone who understands the emotional and logistical landscape of this school. Someone who has lived it. I don't have a formal background in development anymore. You have something better. You have proof. He opened a file. These are notes from every staff member who's worked with you. Parents you've helped navigate applications. Students you've comforted at drop-off. You've built more trust in this community than any resume could list. I stared at the paper, unable to speak. He smiled. And the salary comes with full tuition remission for Sophia. As long as she's here. I walked home in silence that day. Not out of sadness, out of disbelief. Everything I thought I'd lost was unfolding again in front of me. But this time, I didn't have to choose between motherhood and ambition. I could bring both into the same room. That night, Sophia was coloring again. Same table, same crayons. But something had changed. She looked up. Mommy, did we win? Smiled. We didn't win. We showed the truth. And that was enough. She tilted her head. Is Daddy mad? I knelt beside her. I don't know. Maybe. But people get mad when they're caught trying to pretend something that isn't real. What matters is you're safe. And we're together. She nodded, as if she understood more than a 7-year-old should. Then she said, You know what I told Miss Patel today? What? That my mom fights like a superhero. But with papers instead of punches. I laughed so hard I cried. Weeks turned to months. Sophia thrived at Morstone. She joined a reading club, made a new best friend, and won the school's kindness award at the year-end assembly. I stepped into my new role slowly, nervously, but each week I grew more confident. And one day, in the staff lounge, I found a yellow envelope with my name. No return address. No handwriting I recognized. Inside was a folded sheet. Anna. I don't know if I'll ever have the courage to say this to your face. Maybe I don't deserve to. But I need you to know, I lied to myself for a long time. I convinced myself that I was the one making sacrifices. That I was the one holding the family together. That you were selfish for wanting more than being my wife. The truth is, you were always more. You built the world we lived in, and I tore it down because I couldn't handle the idea that I wasn't the center of it anymore. I saw what Sophia said about you in her class project. That you were brave. That you protected her even when it was hard. I guess that's when I knew I had lost the right to call myself her father in any real way. I don't expect forgiveness. But I hope someday she understands that her mother is the reason she'll never have to be small for anyone. Marcos. I sat with the letter for a long time. Not because it changed anything, but because it didn't need to. I had already let go of the idea that he would ever validate my choices. What mattered now wasn't his guilt, it was my own freedom. That summer, Sophia and I took a road trip to the coast. Nothing fancy. Just sand, wind, and cheap ice cream. She collected seashells and asked if she could bring some back for Miss Patel. We stood by the water one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Do you think the sun ever feels scared before it sets? She asked. I looked at her, surprised. What do you mean? Like, maybe it's afraid to leave the sky, but it still does it anyway. And then it gets to rise again. I knelt beside her. That's exactly what courage looks like. And in that quiet, salty air, I realized something. I hadn't just survived. I had risen again. Not as someone who gave everything up, But as someone who finally understood what it means to build a life that doesn't ask you to choose between your purpose and your heart. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story and tell us where you're watching from.